In 2010, I was an 8-year-old kid obsessed with Magic: The Gathering. I didn't really know how the rules worked, and my older brother and his friends took this opportunity to destroy me each time we played. I did know a few things though. Magic released in expansions known as sets. Each 3 sets were a block, and each block focused on a new, unique world known as a plane. And the planes were beyond amazing. I couldn't wrap my kid head around how each one felt so real and alive. I quickly fell in love with each piece of art and flavor text that offered me a glimpse into the lives and stories of those on other worlds. My most recent obsession at the time was with the plane of Zendikar. My brother had bought a Worldwake Fat Pack earlier in the year, leaving me with M10 of all sets. But after flipping through the card booklet, I knew I wanted to find out more. So every day after school, I snuck up to our computer and tried to learn more about the plane of Zendikar and its story. I quickly found and read the Path to the Planeswalker webcomics online, and they were exactly what I wanted. The comics offered glimpses of planeswalkers like Chandra Nalaar and Jace Beleren, who were exploring Zendikar in order to unlock an ancient secret. I'd highly recommend giving them a read if you haven't already. They cover a lot of different sets, and they're really well done. With each issue of the comic, I wondered more and more what secrets the plane was hiding. What were these strange floating rocks that covered the world? And who was this Ugin fellow? And just like the planeswalkers, I had no idea what was in store for the plane. Flash forward a few months. My brother's friend had bought a fat pack of the next and final set on Zendikar, which had just released. Rise of the Eldrazi? No, Eldrazi, that's it. I didn't really know how to pronounce the word as a kid. It was very alien. But looking at the set, I quickly saw what the word meant. Rise of the Eldrazi introduced giant eldritch monsters known as, Eldrazi. They weren't like any cards I'd ever seen. They had some of the highest power and toughness values printed in cards up until that point. And their mana values were astronomical too. Not that it mattered though, because as a kid, I'd probably already have lost before being able to cast them. Still, they felt so strong, and I was so excited to play with them. I flipped through the booklet and card list about probably a dozen times, reading and rereading all the text on Emrakul, Kozilek, and Ulamog. But then, I felt a twinge of sadness about something. I remember looking closely at the art on all the cards and their flavor, and seeing these big monsters destroy the world I'd fallen in love with. I saw armies massacred and mountains leveled. I had spent months exploring Zendikar, and I didn't want to see the plane die. As I was looking through the pages of the booklet one final time, my eyes landed on a white uncommon card that wasn't really special, but it stuck with me at the time. It was this card, Time of Heroes. I didn't really understand the effect just yet because I didn't know what level counters were, but I was so captivated by the art and flavor text. These people were fighting a foe bravely, a foe they knew they couldn't hope to win against. I stumbled upon the card on Scryfall again just a few days ago, and it stood out to me again. I thought about it for a bit, and after all these years, I finally understand why it's so important to me. When I saw this card nearly 12 years ago, for the first time in my life, I found myself consciously rooting for an underdog, and I've loved underdogs ever since.
What a surprise this is!
We all love a good underdog story. Rocky is a common example of a scrappy young protagonist who trains hard to defeat an opponent that no one thinks he can beat. But underdog stories have existed for far longer than that. David and Goliath comes to mind as one of the earliest examples of a popular underdog trope. But what makes an underdog character likable or deserving of our support? The author Jocelyn Chase outlines the first 3 steps to writing a successful underdog. Number 1, we have to create a character that readers can root for. Chase first recommends creating a likable character that we, the audience, can get behind. Of course, when it comes to our friends on Zendikar, we aren't just cheering for one well-developed character. Time of Heroes depicts multiple characters that we know nothing at all about, but we're inclined to feel some sort of sympathy for their plight anyway. Why is that? Well, it's likely due to the fact that, at this point, players had spent months getting accustomed to the world of Zendikar and the daily lives of the people living there. The sets Zendikar and Worldwake focus on building the world and expanding our understanding of its inhabitants. Zendikar is comprised of 5 main races alongside the humans that live there. There are the vampires of Gul-Draz, ruled over by blood chiefs of different family lineages. The world is also home to the Core, a race players had first seen years ago during the invasion block. The Core are daring adventurers and nomads, and explore the plane on pilgrimages. Zendikar is also home to the Merfolk, who have spread across the world in order to uncover its secrets. They are tricksters and explorers, and they house their findings primarily in Seagate, a large city dedicated to scholarship. And, of course, Zendikar is home to thieving goblins and territorial elves. Did any of what I just say interest you? Well, there's an article in the description below with more information on the original race design of Zendikar if you want to know more. But if you were interested in these beings and their lives, then the design team successfully made characters and a world that you can root for. And I think they did a pretty good job. Step 2. Portray the disempowerment. The second step, which I believe is more important than the first, is to portray the disempowerment of the underdog. As Jocelyn Chase puts it, we need to show how your protagonist is being stripped of everything they've worked for. Show how circumstances have turned against them, forcing them to their knees. I mentioned that I think this is more important than the first step, and I believe that because, in the context of a magic card, this aspect needs to be more immediately discernible to the viewer. You may not know anything about the world of Zendikar or its people, like we mentioned above, but looking at Time of Heroes should still make you feel like you're looking at a battle between an outmatched but hopeful group of heroes and an unbeatable foe. You see, individual magic cards don't really have a lot of time or space to work with when it comes to evoking emotions or feelings, but they still often manage to do a really good job anyway. Cards can make us feel something by using some combination of a card name, the art of the card, the effect of the card, and the flavor of the card. Here's a great example of a card that uses all of these characteristics to its advantage. Obliterate. Obliterate is a red board wipe, introduced first in the Invasion set. Immediately, we can see how it uses its name and art to convey sheer power. Obliterate means to destroy utterly, and the art depicts a wizard destroying a landmass far bigger than himself. This feeling of immensity and destruction is further compounded by the effect of the card. It destroys all creatures, artifacts, and, most importantly, lands. Land destruction in Magic is rarer than artifact destruction or creature destruction and more impactful to the flow of the game. And its inclusion helps us understand the magnitude of the action being depicted by the card. Lastly, its flavor text brings even more depth to the card. We provided with the motivation of the spell's caster, Baron, who's clearly suffered greatly. Without explicitly saying it, the card expertly conveys a story of grief and rage. Obliterate has stood out to me since I saw it first more than a decade ago. Can you think of a card that elicits emotions in such a way to you? I'd love to hear some examples in the comments below. In the case of Time of Heroes, though, the disempowerment that we mentioned earlier is mainly conveyed through the art of the card. Let's take a closer look at the piece by Keikai Kotaki. Of note in this artwork is its composition. To make our heroes feel like real underdogs, they're quite literally under the challenge they face. The challenge is imposing, and our warriors are situated on the lower right of the piece, while the Eldrazi they look upon is at the top left. It's also much bigger than them and far more grotesque. I only realized this much later into the scriptwriting process, but the Eldrazi being depicted on the art is Emrakul, one of the 3 Eldrazi titans. It's a reality-altering being made of tentacles and arms that's supposed to be far more powerful than any other Eldrazi, including its 2 counterparts, Kozilek and Ulamog. This just goes to show exactly what kind of foe we're facing, and how outmatched our heroes really are. The disempowerment of the Zendikar people is also underscored by the obscure and cloudy weather, and the grim, tense expressions of the army, making the imminent battle seem even more foreboding. With these elements, the piece manages to make us grasp the enormity of the challenge our protagonists face. These details are used again and again in Magic whenever a card wants to evoke the emotions of an underdog story. Here are some other examples. In this card, Valorous Stance from Fate Reforged, a lone warrior challenges a massive dragon to a battle. The dragon towers above the soldier and is partially obscured by clouds. This is almost exactly the same in Path of Bravery and Ajani's Last Stand, which also depict our protagonists facing off against a big dragon. Staunch Hearted Warrior, a card from Theros, depicts a similar scene in a different way. The monster is entirely out of frame, but its shadow completely envelops the warrior, adding to the scary or foreboding elements of the piece. Time of Heroes and the cards we examined do an excellent job in creating a hopeless situation that our protagonist must overcome. We can feel the helplessness that they perhaps must be feeling as they charge down a huge monstrosity with their lives on the line. What these cards also share in their design is the optimism they elicit in the viewer despite their circumstances. That is the third step in creating a good underdog. So, we've got a story of likable characters facing an insurmountable challenge. What's next? Well, the underdog must be appealed to overcome the obstacle in front of them. Resilience is key for an underdog to appeal to us. So how does Time of Heroes convey this spark of resistance? It does so in a few ways. The name of the card and its flavor text are overt descriptions of the bravery of our underdogs. Let's give that flavor text a read. No one spoke. There was no need. The threat of the Eldrazi presented a simple choice. Lay down your weapons and die for nothing, or hold them fast and die for something. I don't have much more to add except wow. This is undoubtedly one of my favorite pieces of flavor text in the game. It speaks for itself, and it complements the austerity of the art perfectly. Lastly, let's talk about the effect of the card. Time of Heroes buffs any creature you control with a level counter. But what are level counters? Well, Rise of the Eldrazi introduced a mechanic known as level counters, which allow players to pay mana at sorcery speed to add levels to some creatures. Once leveled up, these creatures can gain new abilities and higher powers and toughnesses. From a flavor perspective, our levelers are the underdogs, the Rocky Balboas, and pumping them up with mana is like giving them a training montage to grow from. Designer Doug Bayer tells us that Rise of the Eldrazi's levelers are adventurers who've taken it upon themselves to stand up against the Eldrazi. Zendikar's heroic mages, rogues, and warriors start out as talented neophytes, empty vessels just waiting to be filled with the experiences necessary to realize their potential. Given time, they would adapt their minds to meet the demands of a desperate battle, reinforce their bodies to endure otherworldly pain, and develop arsenals of unique abilities capable of thwarting any enemy. Time of Heroes plays in this sentiment and gives extra power to the mechanical underdogs of our story. This card is a beautiful convergence of art, flavor, and function that illustrates one of the most inspiring stories of Defiance in Magic's history.
Ain't gonna be no rematch. Ain't gonna be no rematch.
Don't want one.
The author we've been drawing from, Jocelyn Chase, discusses a few more steps that are necessary to write an underdog with. The overarching Zendikar and Battle for Zendikar plotlines employ these writing tools, and I'd recommend reading the article if you want to learn more and write some underdog stories yourself. However, the last step she mentions is crucial. Triumph. We need to see our heroes win at the end of the day. That catharsis of positive emotions makes investing into the story and its characters worth it. Now, Rise of the Eldrazi was the introduction of the Eldrazi to the Magic universe. The set was about these overwhelming creatures, and the design team wasn't going to kill them off in the same set that they showed up in. Still, it's important for us as the audience to feel some sort of triumph, no matter how small, so that things don't seem so hopeless. This is where another card from Rise of the Eldrazi comes in. Let's take a look at Momentous Fall. Momentous Fall feels like the logical continuation of Time of Heroes. It may not depict the same battle, but the art of both cards mirror each other nearly perfectly. Here, the elves stand on top of their opponent rather than under them. The Eldrazi is not large nor threatening because it's dead, and the sun shines through the clouds in opposition to the obscured weather from earlier. The mood, which is illustrated through the poses and actions of the elves, is jubilant. We can see that, despite the immense power of the Eldrazi, victory is possible. The underdogs have come out on top. Like I said earlier, this wasn't the end of the Eldrazi on Zendikar by any means. The fate of the plane would be undecided for nearly a decade after Rise of the Eldrazi, and countless lives would be lost in the battle for Zendikar. But these cards serve as a stand-in for all Zendikar, through its struggle to survive against the Eldrazi. In the battle against godlike enemies, each victory counts. The underdog story can't function if we don't believe in our heroes to succeed, and they need to believe in themselves too. Rise of the Eldrazi succeeded in evoking a sense of dogged optimism amidst one of Magic's bleakest and saddest stories. We cheer for the inhabitants of Zendikar because we can see ourselves mirrored in them. Sometimes our problems feel like an unbeatable eldritch horror that we can't win against. But we hope for Zendikar's victory, and ours as well. All we can do is get up and keep going, because Zendikar ended up winning out in the end, and so can we. Also, speaking of underdogs, this dude is super hot.